Let us agree, for now, that we will not say, the breaking makes us stronger, or that it is better to have the pain than to have gone without this love. Let us promise we will not tell ourselves time will heal the wound, when every day our waking opens it anew. Perhaps, for now, it can be enough to simply marvel at the mystery of how a heart so broken can go on beating, as if it was made precisely for this, as if it knows the only cure for love is more of it, as if it sees the heart's sole remedy for breaking is to love still. And if it trusts that its own persistent pulse is the rhythm of a blessing we cannot begin to fathom, but will save us nonetheless.
Good evening and welcome to the Longest Night service. My name is Russ, and at New Hope this has become for many of us one of the most meaningful services of the year, which is odd because it deals with loss. The Longest Night service is a service for those in a season of loss, and we choose those words carefully. To everything there's a season, we are told in the book of Ecclesiastes. There's a time for everything. There is a time to be born and a time to die. There's a time to laugh and there's a time to weep. There's a time to dance, a time to mourn. Loss is a season. It's not a life sentence, but it is a season. And with every season, there is work to be done. There's also its own rewards. But that's hard to find, particularly in this time of year when so many things are moving in the other direction, when everything wants to be abundant, when everything wants to be joyous, when we wish each other a Merry Christmas. Sometimes doing the work of this season can feel very lonely. It can feel very out of place. So let me begin by welcoming you. We're glad you're here. You're in the right place. You're among friends. You're among people who know that our job is not here to try to make you better or anything else better, but it is to find our bearings on this time, and it is to do the work of this season. In this season has many sources that there are many places of loss. Often when we gather, the most prevalent sense of loss has to do with loved ones who aren't here with us, and it could be recent or it could be ancient. It doesn't matter. The echoes are with us forever. But this year particularly, we recognize that the sources of loss are much broader and that we're feeling them in so many different ways, whether it's the loss of a job, whether it's a loss of school, loss of contact with friends, our own mobility, even our ability to come together and be a part of a service like this and be with friends and one another. Sometimes we're not going to be with family. It is such a disruption. There are so many places and sources of loss, and we want to include that in what we are doing this evening. That there are so many places that feed into this. And there is a path. Now, I'm standing here in front of a candle that prepares us in this time of abundance. It tries to attune us in the weeks leading up to Christmas to the attributes of God, be they the candle of hope or of peace or of joy or of love. It turns out that in the path of loss, there are candles as well, and we're going to build our service around that this evening. We're going to build our service around the candle of grief, and the candle of memory, and the candle of courage, and the candle of light and love. Because these are the ones that light our path. These are the ones that help us find our way together. We begin with the candle of grief. It's the candle that may be the hardest to get to. It's the one we want to avoid at all costs. It has this feeling in our life is that grief is something that needs to be fixed. It's a problem to be solved. And so many times at this time of year, people kind of give that impression, don't they, that it's okay to grieve for a while, but then they want you to get over it. If not for your sake, at least for theirs. They have a timetable upon which you're supposed to be doing things, and if you're not doing them, then there must be something wrong with you, which only compounds the sense of grief and of loss. We do so much damage to one another that way, don't we? It helps to maybe remember first and foremost that grief is, at its root, has to do with something that is good. And by that I mean this, is that grief is the price we pay for love. The more that we love, the more that we grieve. If there is no love, then there really is no grief or need for it. But when the love is great, the grief is overwhelming. But it points to the fact that we have this great capacity for love and connection. And as somebody said, that grief is love that has nowhere left to go. It doesn't know what to do with itself anymore. And so grief has all kinds of different ways of manifesting. We usually think of grief as showing up when we are sad or tears, and that's one way for certain. But there are other ways. Sometimes the face of grief has to do with being much busier now or working harder. Sometimes the face of grief has to do with being distracted or watching a lot of television or a lot of internet. Sometimes it has to do with eating and drinking. It has to do with shopping. It has to do with being angry. It has to do with being sad. It has to do with just being very quiet. Grief has many faces. It also has a name. At the core of our grief, at the core of the love that has been disrupted, is a name. And sometimes it's a name that we don't want to say out loud very often. One is because we're afraid that people are not going to understand or they're going to want to fix us, and it's better not to say it. Or sometimes it just becomes too overwhelming. On a night like tonight, as we light this candle of grief, I invite you to say the name. And sometimes it's more, because our griefs are very seldom singular. One grief, the grief of a loss of a loved one, then has a ripple effect into all those things that are familiar and known and part of who we are, including the holidays. The grief over a loss of a job is more than just a paycheck. It also has the ripple effects of the friends that we no longer get to keep, or the connections, or the sense of meaning, the purpose, the identity of who we are. Whatever it is, as we begin this evening, it would be good to write that name down, or the names. If you are fortunate enough to be with those who will hold that sacred for you and not somehow try to fix you, you might be able to tell it to somebody. Or maybe it's just saying it under your breath. But let's begin this evening. And as we say that name, as we lift up those names together, we light the candle of grief.
As all throughout these months, as the shadows have lengthened, this blessing has been gathering itself, making ready, preparing for this night. It is practiced walking in the dark, traveling with its eyes closed, feeling its way by memory, by touch, by the pull of the moon, even as it weighs. So believe me when I tell you, this blessing will reach you, even if you have not light enough to read it. It will find you, even though you cannot see it coming. You will know the moment of its arriving by your release of breath you have held so long, a loosening of the clenching of your hands, of the clutch around your heart, a thinning of the darkness that have drawn itself around you. This blessing does not mean to take the night away, but it knows the hidden roads, knows the resting spots along the path, knows what it means to travel in the company of a friend. So when this blessing comes, take its hand, get up, step out on the road you cannot see. This is the night you can trust that any direction you go, you'll be walking toward the dawn. The pain of grief will keep trying to get your attention until you unleash your courage to gently and in small doses open to its presence. Courage is soft and quiet. Without the steady, quiet resolve and unfailing commitment of courage, bravery would never happen. Courage is what fuels bravery. It is the bridge between fear and action. It is a still, quiet voice encouraging you to go on. Cultivate a relationship with courage every day. Each morning, welcome courage. Find ways to make friends with courage. To befriend literally means making an effort to become friends. Imagine, what would it be like to have courage as a friend who walks beside you at all times, a friend who never nags, never pushes, but simply places a gentle hand on your back and whispers words of encouragement, helping you take the next step and the next. With courage by your side, you're able to go on to walk through your days. I encourage you to take grief's hand and let it lead you through the darkness and toward the light. You may not see the light at first, but forge ahead with courage and with the faith that light and hope and happiness does exist. Feel your pain, your sorrow, your sadness, your disbelief, your agony, your heartbreak, your fear, anxiety, and loneliness as much as you can. Look for simple ways to give voice to courage throughout the day. Maybe it's simply having the gumption to get out of bed, but maybe it's the courage to share how you feel about your loss with a coworker or friend, or walk through the doors of a grief support group. It could be simply making a phone call you've been putting off, or writing that thank you card to someone who helped you after the funeral, or going alone to church, or finding the backbone to be honest with yourself about something you fear. Healing after death is hard. It takes courage in all shapes and sizes to mourn fully and live day to day. Congratulate yourself on welcoming courage, regardless of its size and shape.
Feel no guilt and laughter, they know how much you care. Feel no sorrow and a smile that they are not here to share. You cannot grieve forever, they would not want you to. They would hope that you can carry on the way you always do. So talk about the good times and the ways you showed you cared, the days you spent together, all the happiness you shared. Let memories surround you. A word someone may say will suddenly recapture a time, an hour, a day that brings them back as clearly as though they were still here and fills you with the feelings that they are always near. For if you keep these moments, you will never be apart, and they will live forever, locked safe within your heart. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
And there beneath the stars I'll leave you before sure that like me they only met me. They come and go of their own free will. Oh, gently,
The year of 2020 has been filled with tremendous loss on so many levels. Many experiencing the death of a loved one, and many who, while not having lost someone personally, are still surrounded by daily reminders of death. We mourn for all of our losses, for those we've loved, for our lost routines and jobs, rites of passage, special occasions, our ability to see and hold family and friends, our plans for the future, and all of this while fearing for our health and that of our friends and family. Our grief is immense, as is our love. Grief is love. When people think of love, they often think of hearts, romance, and warm fuzzies, but love is far more complicated. Perhaps the most painful kind of love is called grief, which happens when the object of our love is taken away with no hope of return. Grief is love, and the confusion caused by not knowing how to love someone who is gone, or how to cope with uncertainty, loss, and fear in these unique times. Grief is love's frustration, bitterness, anger, and resentment at death's destruction. Grief is love realizing if it wants to thrive, it has to be creative and find new ways to connect and be fulfilled. Grief is love's unwillingness to give up. It is stretching bonds and redefining limits in order to create a space where you can love someone in their eternal absence, where you can move forward and continue to keep even just a glimmer of hope for the future. Some of you may be feeling alienated, isolated, sad, alone. We want to remind you that underneath the frustration, anger, disappointment, despair, guilt, loneliness, and sorrow of grief, quite often, there is love. Don't forget to look for love, even in the smallest of unexpected places. Don't forget to accept love when it is offered to you. And most of all, don't forget to let yourself feel love, even if it may bring you grief. Grief is love.
Angels, where you soar.
This evening, we have walked the paths of loss. We have done that with candles. Candles of grief, candles of memory, candles of courage, and of love. You may have noticed that whether it is the path of loss or the path of abundance, as we walk through each of those candles, the final one is love. I think there's a reason for that. I think the reason is because if we do the work well in either of those seasons, the culmination is a capacity, a greater capacity, to give and receive love. We have one more candle to light, though. At Christmas time, we recognize that as we walk through this path, we do not do it alone, that in the center of all of this is the Christ candle. More to the point, it is the presence of Christ that holds the center of our lives. It holds us, even as our life is fracturing and falling apart. And it reminds us that this loss and this grief, this sorrow that is in our life does not mean we have been rejected by God. It is not a sign of God's displeasure. It is an occasion of God's presence. In the beginning, there was light, and the light came into the world. And it came into the darkness, we are told in John. And the darkness has not overcome it. As that light does its work in us, as it shines into every crevice of our heart, into the wounds of our soul, may it, for you on this longest night, do its work in such a way that as we experience that presence, that work and that light works also through us. That we become a sign, we become a candle for others. It is in this time and these seasons of life when it feels like God is absent, when it feels like when no one is there. And so we rely on one another and those who walk along with us to be the human representation, the human lights of people in whom God has worked. To remind us that God is here, Emmanuel, God with us. This night, may that experience be afresh in you. May it be powerful. May it bring solace. May it bring meaning. May it bring comfort. May it bring others. May it take us into a time and into this season so that whether we are in a season of abundance or a season of loss or whatever season we are in, that light would shine in us and our very life would become testimony that the darkness has not overcome it and it never will. As you go into this season, as you go into this night, may the peace of Christ be with you.
Tell me where is the road I can call my own, that I left, that I lost so long ago. All these